Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm so excited to be showing you ILNP's second winter collection of the season called Snow Day. This is a 6-piece studio color lineup featuring these cozy winter neutrals and some pops of color. So as always, I will save some more of my thoughts for the end after comparisons. For now, let me just show you the swatches. The first shade we have is Pullover, which is described as a polar blue. I've never heard that kind of description before, but I can see it. It's a very wintry blue. I would say it's a little bit of a mid-tone where it has a nice balance between being saturated with a little bit of that wintry dustiness. And as you can see, this had such an impeccable formula. It was incredibly full coverage on the first coat alone, which, spoiler alert, we're gonna see that for the rest of the shades in this collection. So I would say if your nails are shorter and you do tend to have a heavier hand, you might be able to get away with one coat for some of these, but for the sake of it, I just did 2 coats with glossy top coat for everything just to show you that completed mani look. The next shade we have is Undercovers, and this one is described as a creamy ivory. I love shades like this, and I was just so impressed with the formula again. It was very full coverage, though I didn't grab enough on the first coat, so I had to dip back in to get the rest of my nail. And as you might be able to see, it didn't completely self-level, so I feel like this one is a little bit on the thicker or maybe chalkier side, where it's not difficult to work with, but I could see how adding a couple of drops of thinner will just make it apply and self-level a little bit easier. But to be fair, that top right corner always dips down a little bit for me, so I don't always get the smoothest application, or sometimes I'll miss that spot. I think seeing the 2 coats here on my full hand swatch looks a lot better, more even, so yeah, it's just a really solid neutral shade. The darker neutral in the collection is called Woven, and this one is described as a tawny brown. So like the others so far, this had an incredible formula with incredible coverage on the first coat, where I honestly was like, I don't even know if I need a second coat for this, but I could see a little bit of sheerness on the left side of my nail. So I decided to do a second coat, which I feel like made the color a little bit more neutral. Like maybe from that first coat, there was a little bit of that warmth from my natural nail coming through. So even though I do think the color itself is a cozy shade of brown, I just don't know if I love it on me. I feel like there's something about it that's a little too unflattering or sort of clashes maybe. So I don't think I would wear this again as a full hand manicure, but it looks like a perfect shade for nail art. Then we have Mittens, which is described as a light rosy mauve. So this one again had a flawless formula. With it being on the slightly lighter side, I thought it was going to be similar to Undercovers, where it just was maybe a little chalky, but I didn't feel that way at all. I thought this was actually really smooth and it self-leveled nicely. I did just have a little streak on the left side of my nail, but again, it just fully covered up with the second coat. So yeah, these are just solid 2 coat creams, really fantastic formulas. But like the last polish, I don't think this is my right shade, where I always love a pink and I love a dusty wintry pink, but this one I think just is a little too unflattering for me, at least as a full hand manicure. So I wish I liked it more, but I think it works great for the rest of the collection. The next polish is Flurry, and this one is described as a pale cornflower blue. And I would say this is easily my favorite from the collection. I absolutely adore this color, and as expected, it had another great formula similar to the others in this collection. Again, you can see me struggle with that little divot in my nail, so don't mind that. This was perfectly opaque in 2 coats, and with glossy top coat, it just looks so even, so bright and fresh for winter, maybe even a little unexpected because of how bright and crisp the color is. Like normally I associate these cornflower blues with spring, but I'm really feeling it for this season. And rounding out the collection is Cloudy Days, which is a mid-tone gray. And I would say that's pretty accurate. It's definitely a very neutral leaning color, as you'll see later in the comparisons. And not to sound like a broken record, but this had another really flawless formula that was so smooth and buttery to apply, or maybe more creamy to apply, where it just felt so full coverage, but not too thick. Although, I guess as a disclaimer, I do tend to prefer slightly thicker creams, so maybe there are people who would consider these to be too thick. So again, you might need a couple of drops of thinner, but I would say most people would find these easily opaque in 2 coats unless your nails are a lot longer than mine. Color-wise, I wouldn't say this was one of my top favorites. I mean, it's just a gray, and I'm not usually crazy about these mid-tone grays, but it's definitely very appropriate for the overcast weather that I had. And here are my full hand swatches, this time in direct sunlight, since I decided to swatch them all again once the sun was out. Again, while I'm not crazy about some of the colors individually, I really love this color palette. So moving on to comparisons, we're starting with Pullover, and I wanted to see this next to Jumping Puddles and Rainy Days. Jumping Puddles was from the fall collection earlier this season, which I thought was going to be a near dupe to the base color, but as you can see, it is a little bit too dark, and so I thought to pull out Rainy Days, which was from the Overcast collection, which is a little closer in terms of the mutedness, but just too gray in color. I think the closest blue creams that I had to compare were Essie's To Me From Me, which was from a previous winter collection, and Olive's Cerulean. Seeing them side by side in the bottle shot here, I thought they looked kind of similar. Like, the difference is more noticeable in real life, but it's a lot more noticeable once you see them swatched on the nail, where the Essie is just several shades darker and Cerulean is a bit too gray leaning, so unfortunately no dupes. Next for undercovers, I of course am showing this next to Soulmate, which came out in the Valentine's Day trio earlier this year. That one I think was described as a pink ivory color, but for a true ivory, I have Holo Taco's Ivory Tower from the Dark Academia collection. I was so sure this was going to be a dupe, but seeing them on the nail, Ivory Tower is a bit brighter, where there's maybe some mutedness or just like a shade or two darker in undercovers, and hopefully you can see that Soulmate is ever so slightly pink. Some other shades I immediately thought of were Morgan Taylor's Wrapped Around Your Finger and Essie's Urban Jungle. Again, both of these being these off-white, ivory kind of colors. The Morgan Taylor is a bit more yellow leaning though, as I'm sure you can tell from the bottle alone. So Essie looked like it was going to be a bit closer, but seeing it on the nail, that ends up being a little bit darker or maybe more muted compared to undercovers. Or maybe it just has a slightly warmer undertone. It's so hard to tell because they are close. And the last pair of ivory creams that I have to compare are with 2 OPI shades. The first one is My Vampire is Buff, which is on the left, and then Be There in a Prosecco on the right. I would say these two are definitely the closest to being potential dupes for undercovers, where even just between the OPI shades, they're very close. It's just a subtle difference in undertone, where Prosecco is a little bit warmer, so I think that one is closest to undercovers. I'm not sure how easy it is to find at this point, but it does have a thinner formula if that matters. Next for woven, I wanted to show it next to a couple of recent ILNP browns. So we have Ginger Snap on the left from the fall collection and Reindeer Crossing on the right from the most recent collection. Both of those are obviously much darker and also warmer in color and undertone, not to mention just completely different finishes. ILNP doesn't have another brown cream like this, so I thought the other 2 closest browns were Toasted and Cookie Cutter, which are these jelly bases with these hollow flakies. In the bottle alone, you can definitely see the similarity here, where it looks like the same color but in different finishes, but seeing them swatched on the nail, they are so incredibly different, so I would not call these close at all. For reference, here's woven next to Essie's No To Do, which is what I would call a very true mid-toned milk chocolate brown. I feel like the closest creams that I had were Olive's Limestone and Cracked Polish's Rooftops in Bologna, which, as you can see, just don't really compare. Both of those are much lighter and maybe a little bit warmer in undertone compared to woven. So yeah, no dupes here. Moving on to Mittens, I figured I could quickly show this next to Soulmate, which was the pink Ivory from before. That one is much lighter, almost looking white. So for some slightly closer pinks, I then pulled out Knitted and Pink Suede, which are a little bit more similar in terms of like that mid-tone value, but they're very different in undertone, where Knitted and Pink Suede are a lot warmer. Mittens really has that super cool mauve-y kind of undertone, so that made me think of the Holo taco creams from the cottagecore collection. So we have Nip in the Bud on the left and Rosemary Kill on the right, which that one looks a little bit closer. Nip in the Bud has a bit more of that warmer rosy undertone, but even still on the nail they just don't compare. ILNP did give us a light blue in the summer called Oasis, but that one has a much brighter kind of aqua sort of color, so it's not a dupe. For closer cornflower shades, they do have Up Above and Carried Away, but those are specialty finish formulas, more of these jelly bases. Up Above having these iridescent flakies, while Carried Away has those hollow silver flakies. And while I do love these two colors on their own, seeing them swatched next to Flurry makes them look so dull. For some cream comparisons, I have Holo Taco's Well Wishes, which was their newest prototype shade, as well as Holo Taco's Peri-Social, which is kind of closer, but that's more of like a true periwinkle that's purple leaning. Flurry is a true cornflower blue, so it looks sky blue in comparison to these. For some closer, lighter blue cornflower shades, I pulled out Holo Taco's Skipping Stones, which is also from the cottagecore collection. That one is a very pale sky blue shade, and Olivev's Jeannie is what I would call a very true cornflower blue. So again, while they might look similar in the bottle, there is a difference on the nail, where Holo Taco is just not the right shade of blue. It's also a little too light, or maybe just desaturated. So Jeannie is a bit closer in terms of color, just a few shades darker. Lastly, for cloudy days, I thought the closest grays from ILNP were Stormwatch and Flicker. Stormwatch came out in the fall collection a couple of months ago, but that one is a bit too dark. I would say Flicker is a little closer, just being a slightly lighter medium gray, if that makes sense, but it is a totally different finish, having more of a sheer buildable base with a fiery copper shimmer. But I don't know, I just thought the bases in these were the closest. And unfortunately, I only have one true mid-tone gray cream, and that's What's Up Nails Drippy Days. So this is extremely similar in terms of the value, but seeing them side by side, I actually think Drippy Days has a slightly cooler undertone, while Cloudy Days is more of a true neutral. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of ILNP's Snow Day collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release because I think it's really cute. I know not a lot of people are going to be excited to see an all cream lineup, especially as their final collection of the year, but I am a sucker for a good cream, and these formulas were phenomenal. Just really nice to paint with, and not to mention the colors are just really pretty and cozy as well for winter. Not to say that they're especially unique or anything, but I'm just a fan of the color palette. So if you are interested in picking any of these up, they are going to be launching this Friday, December 12th. So I will have ILNP's website linked down below. Make sure you let me know what your favorites are, if you are going to be grabbing some of these, or if you're going to be skipping it entirely. I would love to chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!